small crowd. Thanks for coming.
I'm gonna jump up here.
I guess, everybody, I'm Richard Bondro, President of North Beekeepers. That's Madison Rowe back there, Secretary. Vanessa over here. She's our princess for starting out for princess this year. So everybody sign up for the door prize and raffle drawing back there. Over the past couple months here, we had pretty good events. We had our auction on April 23rd. That went pretty good. Had a pretty good turnout. Had a little rain to start with, but the day turned out pretty nice. The field day we had was a very good turnout. We had probably 25 people or so there. If you didn't get a chance, maybe next year, get a chance to show up. It's a really good day. You learn a lot about getting into the hives. We did hive inspection, mite check, and how to split a hive. We had 3 different stations. We just rotated every half hour. So it's a very good day to learn a lot. We're also, for those that didn't make it, there is a day coming up here. Bobby's already signed up doing the NIAC class out there. It's a basics and business of beekeeping. There's a paper back here if anybody's interested. We finished our 3rd session up this last Saturday here. That was on honey production. Randy Ellsburn actually spoke on that one. But next class is the business side of it, basically it's how to make a business out of beekeeping. So the next one is more of a business one. We will get into the hives yet anyway. Anthony Reason will be teaching that. He does our actual, Vanessa and I will go to a high-tech hive thing, and he's actually an instructor of that too. So, and then the one after that is another one that's going to be at Pat's. If you missed the one for doing a Pat's for the day, he's going to be doing bee diseases, prevention, detection, and treatment. And that's going to be on 8/6. It'll be a Saturday. It's going to be actually at Pat and Peggy's too. So if you missed the one before, you can actually sign up for the NIAC classes. It's $19 per class now. You can sign up for the whole thing or just one class at a time if wherever you want. It's $19 per class. So if anybody is interested in that one, if you missed the one in our field day, that'll be another one, good one to get to. It'll cost you $19. You have to sign up through NIAC to get onto that one. So, but it'll be another class at Pat and Peggy's, and then a couple more after that is preparing for your bees for winter, and then keeping your bees and business alive after that, and then it's a wrap up on that one. So we'll end up on October 22nd is the end of that session. So if everything goes good, we're going to probably get another one next year. We actually got 3 beehives out at NIAC. We started 2 packages, one with everything brand new. One package started out with about 75% drawn comb, and then Pat brought a nuke out there so everybody can kind of see a difference in all the hives. And the class does all the work, except for Saturday they didn't go out there because it was raining. So Vanessa went out, and a couple of them went out and actually added some boxes. Added some boxes the other day, kind of a little bit, so just to get them on there. The students get to do the work in the hives. When we go out there, we have an hour in class, and we go out to the hives an hour and a half or so approximately, and get to go into the hives and dig into them and look at them and learn there. So it's a good class. So anybody interested, go. We have it on our webpage too. The NIAC sign up, you can look at that, and you just call over and sign up. So, looking for a place to have our summer field potluck. Years ago, we used to do a potluck before the COVID. We used to do a summer get-together. We never had meetings, but we used to have a summer get-together. So we used to do a potluck and just kind of get together. This one's going to be both, a potluck and a meeting kind of. So we're looking for a place to have it. Anybody wants to host it, get a hold of me. If not, I think I can find a park that we can probably get into a shelter house and stuff like that. We'll be talking more of a question and answer kind of get together. So people ask a question, and as a group, anybody can answer or put an input in or whatever they want. So that's what it's going to be. It's just kind of a fun day to get together. So if anybody has any more on that, just get a hold of me, like I said. So I guess we'll start up here now. Our speaker for tonight is Gretchen Paluch. She's from the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. She's going to be talking about FieldWatch, field check, whatever way you want to call it, and insecticide issues. So it's all yours, Gretchen.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. It's such a small group. I kind of feel like we should just pull the chairs around, especially those nice cozy chairs. Those are great. Yep, no, I always like getting out of the Des Moines area and going out to see different parts of the state because I am based centrally. Different times of the year I get to go out for different reasons, but most of the time I'm working out of the main office. But that's why I like going to these different meetings and getting to learn a little bit about how things really are working, what's not working for the most part. And so this is something I always look for opportunities like this. And it takes me back a little bit. I have to share a little bit that when I went to graduate school, I actually majored in entomology. So I didn't always work with insecticides and pesticides and regulatory and government programs, but my background is actually in natural product chemistries and also looking at selective miticides and such. I remember one of the labs I worked in did a lot of work working on thymol, and really selectivity for varroa mite and such. So this somewhat takes me back a little bit to some of the work that I got to do in the lab and follow others out into the field to do. So it's kind of nice to be able to see how things are going, what products are being used, which ones people think are working well, and again, which ones aren't. But my day job is more so focused on pesticide programs in the state of Iowa. And so that's really my area of expertise right now. And so many times when I come to meetings like this, folks tend to have a lot of questions. How does this work? How do I do this? How do I work with the investigatory process? Because Iowa does have a program where you can call in and report incidents and have investigators come out to your site and look at whether or not a pesticide has been used in accordance with its label, in accordance with the laws and regulations of the state. We do have that service, and that's something that we get a lot of questions about. And so many times there are specific questions that come up, and so feel free to interrupt. If there's something that comes up on a slide, it's a small enough group, we can certainly pause and talk about those situations, because many times what comes into our office down in Des Moines is very case specific. Everyone's got their own site, their own circumstance, and situation that's going on with a pesticide application or use outside of that. So that's something that we do have people that are there to handle. So that's really where I work now. That's my day job. And so we are the main office that responds to calls from all over the state. So believe it or not, there are 8 field investigators that have the pesticide investigation title, and they're positioned all across the state of Iowa. And depending upon when an incident calls in, they get assigned cases and they go out and do what they can to look at those instances. And then we have folks in the main office, and there is a laboratory facility also in central Iowa where samples can go and be analyzed for testing to see if there's any pesticide residues there as well. So we have folks that do case review and review all of the information that's collected in our investigations, and then the department does issue final determinations on those. So again, this is a full program that's in place, and we get funding from EPA as well as the state of Iowa to carry out those services. So many times people want to know how that works, and hopefully I can cover some of that today. But before I jump into the pesticide-specific programs, one of the things that's a little bit newer, or was a relatively recent change in the past 5 years or so, was this program called FieldWatch. How many folks are familiar with FieldWatch? Yeah. So it's a name that gets recognized, right? This is actually a system that's a web-based system that the department did partner with, and now we use in place of our sensitive crops directory. Did anyone use the older sensitive crops directory that used to be in place? That was also on our website, but this is somewhat the newer version of that and has replaced it to an extent. And it's under the name of FieldWatch. And I'm slowly starting to become more and more involved with FieldWatch because they've really expanded a lot of what they originally started out to do. FieldWatch started out of Indiana at Purdue, actually under the term Driftwatch. Are folks familiar with Driftwatch, perhaps?
B-check, all kinds of things.
B-check?
Yeah.
Oh, these are all
kinds of
great.
All of the above.
So a lot of these terms, FieldWatch, B-check, Driftwatch, are all somewhat in the same website and the same grouping of websites. So you'll see a lot of those show up. One thing that they've done very well is they've really brought a lot of people to this website. And in order for something like this to work, you really need to have an audience. You need to have people going to the website, checking it, looking for information, registering on the website. I would assume folks in this room probably are some of those that are going to be registering sites on FieldWatch. So you need everyone to kind of go there, right? Or else it's not going to work if you only have, one group of folks that are going there. So they've really continued to expand, and that's one thing that I've seen with other parts of programs, pesticide programs, is that it can be really challenging to bring people in and talk in a way that is not in a regulatory sense. So when you're trying to bring people in and work on a tool, work on more communication happening on the front end, before there are incidents that take place, before there are adverse effects, that's really remarkable. That's something that's really great to see and hear. And this particular system has really done a good job of that. It's about communication. It's about awareness. That's really where they started off, and they've really built an audience, I would think, over time. And you can see up here some of those terms you mentioned: Driftwatch, right? B-check, FieldWatch. As you can see, they have a few other ones that have come about, and I believe crop check is one where folks can register row crop sites now in the state. So if you've got a particular crop that you want to put online, that can be registered.
Is that more of a, if you have more of a sensitive crop, not really corn or beans, maybe more of a sensitive crop, maybe?
So yes, you can register sensitive crops, and I believe when you say sensitive crop, also specialty crop, a lot of these sites are ones that get reviewed through State Horticulturist Office. So they do have different categories you can select from. You can select grapevine. They have a variety that you can choose from, and we could actually go on there and show the long listing.
Like
there might be a slide here. Apple trees.
Yeah.
There's a variety, but yes, there are some sensitive crops, different sensitive crops for different reasons, really. And I believe the crop check tool is one that came out of, I remember seeing some of those in Arkansas and some of the other states, and it continues to grow and where it's going to be in future years. So this particular system, the FieldWatch one, is one that continues to bring people in. The number of people that are going online and using that site, as you can see, the number of individual users, number of registered sites, number of mapped acres, and you can see a little bit, that is the US there in the middle. It's a little bit of a distance, but the green boxes are going to be the ones where they have states that are participating in this registry. So there's a lot more information about what types of sensitive sites are located in different areas, and that's a way that applicators, before they go and apply pesticides, can know what's really in their area and be aware of what sort of situations they might encounter. And it may impact how they use pesticides or how they select pesticides as well. And especially with a group like this, with registered apiaries, if you have a registered apiary in the state of Iowa, that would be something that there may be additional regulation in place for, and additional protection under the state regulation. So there are reasons why people go in and register on these sites, and again, it's something that we continue to see grow. They continue to add states, and I remember when I first came on board this year, they were talking about adding DC. Believe it or not, they were getting folks to register beehives in Washington, DC, so they were really excited about that. And as you can see, if you look in the middle of the screen there, you can see what Iowa's map looks like. One of the things that I'm always excited to talk about with the FieldWatch maps is that Iowa is an excellent example of where we have beekeepers going and registering sites. And when you compare the numbers, it's always amazing how many beekeepers are registering sites in Iowa. It's great. It's great. There's a lot of information there. Folks are going to know where those beehives are. I know that in talking to some other states, other people that work in pesticide programs, many times they ask, well, how do you get that? How do you get that kind of participation? And you know, it's something that when I walked into working for the department over 10 years ago, we already had that with the sensitive crops directory, and it has continued to grow, I think, over the years. And I think it's because we've got folks like yourselves participating in these meetings. You've got an active community out there. You've also got an apiary inspection group out in the state lab area as well. And I know that they're very active and go out every year and have quite a few folks running around the state doing inspections as well. And then we also get calls from folks that are looking at whether or not pesticides are being applied in accordance with their label directions and in accordance with the bee rule in the state of Iowa as well. So we get calls for all those reasons. So I think that there's just an active community there engaged in this particular effort. And it shows with the numbers. There are some numbers there from 2017, I think, is when they were producing totals there, but we always have a large number of beehives showing up on Iowa's map, which is great. I've heard from other states that there are concerns about posting publicly the location of your hives, that there have been some concerns with those. Has anyone had any issues with posting on FieldWatch, or had any
I've
issues
known
with
that
nature?
there's a few beekeepers that they don't post where their hives are in certain locations just to keep them kind of quiet, so nothing happens to them.
Okay.
I've heard of that, but some they registered and some they don't register. So,
Well, and I've heard that from other states as well. It seems to be one of the responses that pesticide programs and Department of Ags get when they're asking, well, you know, what can we do? How can we provide more notification and familiarity with what sort of sensitive sites there are in the area? And so that's when the has come up.
Would that be more of a concern of somebody stealing hives, or more of a vandalism issue?
both of them.
Both
I
issues?
think more of that, yeah.
I had something, when I first did it, I apparently put the wrong place, and I was in the middle of the Shellrock River with my beehive, and they sent me a text saying, is this right? Is this where you're going to have your beehive, in the middle of the river? And I'm like, oh! So they do check. They're,
So you had it in the wrong spot.
yes.
Now, was that with this program?
It was
the map,
with,
or the earlier program, out of
No, I
curiosity?
think it was, well, I just did it last year. Pat had said to
Okay.
register, and I thought I had it right, but I clearly did not.
Because that's something that we do want feedback on how it's working for you.
No,
I
it
mean,
was
yeah.
fine once I did it right. It
Because
wasn't
you
your
gotta,
problem.
you gotta go into the map and you gotta figure
Yeah,
out where you're at
yeah,
and get
yeah.
your right spot. So
And-
sometimes that might be a little,
And I was at my daughter's house, and what happened is, and she lives on the river, not in the river, but she lives by the river, and so it somehow.
they put you where you're at that point.
Right, well,
Not where your bees
kind
were
of,
at
yes,
that
and
point.
so I'm like, but they called. I mean, I thought, oh, I did this wasn't hard, I did it so good.
Yeah, if you're at your spot where you're gonna put your
Yeah, I was at the
beehive,
wrong-
it's better because it'll come up and ask you at this location and you be, yes, and it's, boom, it's right there.
So is that with the mobile app? Did you use it on a
I think
tablet or phone?
I think so, but I can do mine,
We did
I do
it.
mine at one spot, I can, you know, I know how to do it enough that I can move it, but
Why?
sometimes if you're right at your spot, it'll ask you at this spot, you hit yes, and it puts it right at that spot. So it makes it pretty simple.
So I have heard that there is a mobile app for the bee check registry, so that should have a GPS component, and it should
Yes.
help with some of that. And
Yes, and
I
it
have
does.
heard from some folks, at least compared to what we had previously, where you would type in the coordinates or the location, that having this map, the Google map, has been helpful for folks. You can see things a little bit easier, you can outline certain things if you're doing a crop or whatnot, so, and that mobile app. And I believe there's also a 1 mile bubble that kind of comes up
Yeah.
around the site, and that's where you would have the B-roll piece actually displaying for you on the map. So I've heard the visibility has been good, but if there are issues, that's exactly what we want to hear about, because the
Well,
idea
it's my
here
fault,
is,
so I didn't.
well, it's good to hear that you got a call,
I did.
because it got fixed,
And they're
right?
like, seriously?
Cause they check on it, before they okay you to go on.
Yep,
Yes.
yep. And that's good, I think, even, because I work in the pesticide shop, so I'm not in the group that actually does those review and approvals and maintains the registries. But we do go and look at the information when we get a call. So when we get an incident report, or if someone calls in, yeah, we get calls from applicators too. You know, we'll get calls from almost anybody asking questions about pesticides, and so they may call in and ask about one of those as well. So it's good to have the right information.
Right there.
Is that where we are right now?
Yeah.
Oh, so there's quite a few there.
That's right there, right around
That's great.
Mason City area.
They're all riches.
Some are.
Well, you should feel pretty good being in Iowa as it relates to this particular tool, because there's a lot of communication going on. And again, it's gotta be a two-way street, right? You can't just have the sites up on the website. You need to have applicators going there and checking those, right? That's the other component. And that's another piece that I can tell you that I see, at least in what I do. We do hear and talk to applicators quite frequently. Our program does the applicator certification as well as responding to incidents in the state. We've got two sides of our program. And so we see and hear how applicators are using it, what they're familiar with on this website. And I can even tell you from the numbers, there's a lot of applicators that are registering in this system. Mm-hmm.
How often do applicators have to get their license renewed?
So license, and I just want to make sure, we get people asking questions about, well, what's the difference between a license and a certification? The license is what's issued to the company. So it's going to be a commercial entity, someone who's in the business of applying pesticides for hire. That company has to renew their license each year. It's an annual license. For an applicator, someone who's working for that company, the individual has to renew every 3 years. It's a 3-year certification that we issue to that person. Now, if the company they're working for isn't up to date and lapses, basically they don't renew, that certification is in a sense inactive. It goes inactive until the company comes up to date, because you can't operate unless your company license is up to date each year as well. So yeah.
What about farmers?
So farmers, anyone in this room, anyone in the state of Iowa can go to a retail shop. You know, I was driving in here, I saw Walmart when I was coming in. What was that? Was that 18? Was I on 18 coming in?
This is 18.
Yeah. So you can go there and you can buy a pesticide, right? All of us can go there and buy a lawn and garden product, right? We don't need a certification to do that. Those products that are going to be for sale to the general public are going to be general use pesticides on the whole. Those are ones that we can all go and purchase. A farmer can go and purchase them as well. They want to go and purchase a general use pesticide, apply it on their property, completely free to do that without additional regulations at the state level, just like I could do on a residential property. There's no difference there. It's when a farmer is interested in purchasing and applying a restricted use pesticide. So an example of that, some of the dicamba products for over-the-top use, those are restricted use pesticides. Some of the insecticides, a number of the ones, Warrior, there's a variety, a lot of the insecticides that you're gonna be seeing applied in the ag sector, many of those can carry restricted use pesticide classifications. So to do that, they would need to be certified as a private applicator. It is different than someone who's applying pesticides for hire, because they're gonna be applying the pesticides to their own property. And
They
there's
still
a
have to
decision.
follow the rules.
Well, we should all be following the
Yeah.
rules, right? I mean, even someone who goes and picks up, a lawn and garden pesticide, you are, basically there is a law that says you must apply a pesticide in accordance with its label directions. That goes for everybody. In terms of what sort of level of enforcement response and what different classifications people carry, that's where you can see differences on what that initial response is gonna be and how that increases over time. So, and what I'm referring there is the Department of Agriculture does not have the ability to go and suspend or revoke someone's certification if they don't have one, right? So we don't have the same type of enforcement authority over someone who doesn't carry a certification. You need to have an authority to carry such actions out.
So what you're saying though is if somebody, like, I rent the land out and the farmer called me and said, okay, I'm going to be doing, spraying on Sunday. And so Saturday I put extra sugar water out for the bees, cause I figured then they won't go out there for anything, they'll stay where they're supposed to and hopefully the chemical won't bother them. But I mean, I don't know what he sprayed, I didn't ask him, so if, I should have asked him, right, and see what.
So you're gonna, we have different types of responses and ways that we try to help folks work through those situations. It's not always.
They aren't dead, they're good yet, so I think they're.
Oh, so this is a real situation?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Well, if you do have one of those, one of the first things we try to encourage folks to do is talk to your neighbor. See if there is a good way to communicate when applications are gonna happen, especially ones that carry a hazard statement for pollinators, for bees. And a lot more products carry those now. They didn't used to have the same type of hazard statements that they do now. There was a big effort that was put forth through EPA, and a lot of the labels have them now. Not every pesticide has it. That's gonna be based on what EPA finds when they go through the registration process. So at the federal level, there's a lot of studies, a lot of data that gets collected, generated before those active ingredients and those products ever reach the market. It takes a long time for those products to reach the market and then be sold. And so there is data information they base that off of. And that's what dictates kind of how that label gets formed and what hazard statements are put on there. So it's based on studies that have been done. So if it has the statement, hazard statement, toxic to bees, many times there can be different types of wording, do not apply, avoid application. Some of these are stronger terms than others. So it's all product specific is what I'm trying to get at. There's not one answer for every single pesticide that they could go out and purchase. But what we look at is we look at the labels, what are they applying? So when we get a call, if you were to call the Pesticide Bureau, we would have to contact the applicator to find out what they sprayed. And that's where we'd be starting to see if there was an issue.
But I mean, I could talk to him directly too, I don't.
And that's where
I wouldn't have to.
some people feel comfortable doing that, other folks don't. They would rather send someone from the state out, and they can do that. We handle both, but many times things like this, FieldWatch is a good way for folks to connect, because many times I believe they have an address on there, right? And there's also an email address as well, so there's ways.
Phone number, email address on them, so they can contact you ahead of time.
See, last year he called me after he applied. This year at least he called me before. So see, we're making progress, we are.
But if he sprayed something early here, it probably wasn't an insecticide though.
I
It's more of
hope,
a,
I don't think so. I think
more
it
of a
was just-
herbicide
yeah,
spray.
that's what I'm
It's
guessing.
probably what he's
But I
been
can
spraying now.
ask, I didn't even think of asking, And so I saw him Monday and I said, oh, you're spraying again. He goes, this is nitrogen. I went, oh, well, that's good. So I didn't ask him what he sprayed before. I mean, you know.
Well, that's the other thing is sometimes it can be something that might have an impact, sometimes it's not.
Right, that's
It can be
exactly
either
right.
one. How many folks do have the ability to just call their neighbor or email their neighbor or even know who's farming around them? About 30%, maybe getting close to 40 out of the group. That's not too bad.
I have a couple of them, they says, yeah, I was you beekeepers, I says, I can only spray over here at a certain time, and I can go over here, and I gotta go back, and then I got.
I hear that so much,
Yeah.
where they're like, oh, we have to look out for you, and I'm like, yeah. I get that a lot from them, like, what else do you want me to do? Not have these? So yesterday I came home and we had a field to the east of us, and my whole yard smelled like 248.
Mm.
And I'm like, that's very rare for that to happen. And I'm like, I'm not usually like concerned about it. I'm like, that's a little too close for comfort. I know they're not spraying for insects right now because there's no, nothing out there. But if I can smell it, that's probably means it's almost too close to my beehives. Or what's your thought on that?
So part of the reason why we do investigations is to come up with the facts,
Yep.
kind of bring the facts out of those types of scenarios.
Mhm.
So we'd have someone come out, look at the site, maybe collect some samples, maybe they would talk to whoever called in, and then they'd also talk to the applicator as well. Find out what was sprayed when, and we look at weather conditions as well. And it just depends on the products. And I will say that there are some products that are gonna have more of a smell
Mhm.
than others. Some are, I mean, there's a range there. You know, I've
If they're harmful to bees, we don't know.
so that's why we go to the label, because that label is probably the most accumulated information that we can use, because it's gone through a risk, what EPA calls a risk assessment. So they've looked at a variety of studies, added certain use practices to go along with that particular product to ensure that if used appropriately, you know, if used in accordance with those label directions, there should not be unreasonable adverse effects. It's basically something that has gone through the registration process. So we try not to guess. You know, when we're going out there, that's why we want to base what we do and what sort of response we give coming back from that label. That label is absolutely key to the way that our program functions. So again, it's hard to give blanket statements because of that, because we have to find out what it was first and foremost before we can figure it out. You know, there's a range of examples of different types of chemicals and chemistries that are going to be more volatile than others. I mean, just think of the kitchen. I mean, we've all been in kitchens. Certain foods have more of an aromatic component than others. Does it always equate to, you know, potency and adverse effects? Not all the time. So what we do is we kind of go back to those toxicological studies, the base studies that are going toward that registration to try to address some of those. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It's coming back around to we would go out and do the investigation and answer those questions. But this is where, you know, coming back around to the more we can start some of that dialogue, we find that many times that addresses the questions before they get to a stronger dispute, so to speak, one that we can't really help resolve, and the facts that we recover from the investigation, while they address the incident as best as we're able to, you know, oftentimes not everyone's happy with the end result because of what's found. So if it can be addressed early on, that's great. We look for those opportunities. So again, if you're able to communicate with your neighbor, and I know that sometimes that changes. Sometimes you don't know who's out there, right, from year to year, and that's been more and more.
You have a big job, because it seems the word attitude comes up as I'm listening, and I'm sure you hear more war stories. But and beekeepers, I've similar with grandchildren, and the flags blowing right into my yard. And so I have to check in with the tanker truck and the sprayer. It's not in a timely fashion. But somehow we have to get that collaborative attitude going.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure we're there yet. I mean, it varies a lot, I'm sure, from individual to individual. But we hear, and I have family members within the ag industry, and I kind of hear them, and they hear me. And it just seems like the word communication is very good. We just somehow need to enhance the communication and the attitude of collaboration. And I hope we can do that as the years go on. And I hope that we can continue to build beekeeping. And I hope that we can work together with the ag chemical industry and the sprayer, people that are applying it and spraying these crop fields.
I would have similar sentiments. The pesticide programs are one, again, that we take the calls. We are the ones that go out to the different field sites. It's all a pretty tight-knit group. And we are a neutral party. We don't represent one particular stakeholder. We are representing Iowa, and that's what that group does, is they go out as a neutral observer to document facts. Again, to try to look at what happened and capture that, and come back around to, well, what are the laws and regs and executing whatever responsibilities we have at that point in time. So the groups coming out there are going to be doing that now. If you call somebody else, you call a private entity, you're going to get different responses. You could get different responses. It just depends. As far as the state programs go, I can comment on what it is we do. And one of the things we try to spend time on is these types of efforts, because they do have a tendency to have more positive impacts. And we try to listen coming out to meetings like this to hear what impressions are of those tools. Are they working? Not just from groups like this, but also applicator groups, again, because we've got to get both in there listening. And when I look at other states, again, that just jumps out at me, is that we have a lot more people going on to these websites, participating than I've seen in other states. So that's something that there is a dialogue. And I think the more and more we can use that, the more we can make people aware of what's going on. So it sounds like this group is familiar with these registries. One of the things that FieldWatch does is they do try to make sure folks know that they're free, for those that are going to be registering. There's no cost to you to go, as long as you've got a phone. Most folks have a tablet or a smartphone nowadays, and usually that goes pretty well. On the applicator side, they have different options on what they can sign up for. One of the things that does draw in applicators, and I have heard this from those companies and different groups that work with applicators closely, is that having access to some of these data components and being able to import the data into their system and whatever job system they use, that compatibility factor is really important to them, and being able to bring in these sites without large labor-intensive, staffing intensive matters. Being able to just import it and it working with the software they use in their sprayers actually helps, because it does display. And I've seen it with applicator records that we collect. So when we go out on investigations, we see these places are marked. So it's there. There's a record of it. And it's coming through in different types of applicator software. So having that range and that compatibility factor has been absolutely crucial to getting applicators in there and displaying it, having it on the record so they can see it on the maps.
Yeah, most applicators nowadays are all GPS run, so they know exactly where that machine went across that field at what time. So there's no getting around it, they know what is where.
We do see a number of the sites showing up on applicator records. So yes, we do see that, I know there are some groups that may not always, or may not have the same level of software and sprayers. It's not something I can say everyone's got, but we do see it come through. And more frequently than we used to, that's for sure. And, I think having some of those efficiencies is something that's gonna bring more and more applicators in the future. And there's different companies and different types of software, so it's something that's a constant, piece to stay up to date on. So there's a lot of work with that. And applicators, in addition to that, can access this registry through the website, right? You can go to the web and look. I mean, I could go there right now, we could pull it up, and we could look at all the different sites in that particular area. Some of the differences in memberships is that if they do have a membership, they will get an email notification when a new site is registered in their area. So they can provide some of that information, even get that notification on the front end. So that's very helpful. We talked about the sites being free, but the data subscription is something that they have to pay for. So there are parts of the system that you can't get around. There is work involved with that, and staying up to date, again, with software, that's a big piece of it. Also the mobile app. So when you talk about some of these sprayer systems, what kind of what are they running off of? Are they running off a tablet? What is the actual computer that's in the sprayer itself? And so compatibility with some of those and mobile apps have been really helpful, I think, with this as well. So that's another piece that they've done pretty well. They've stayed up to date on that, and they continue to. We talked a little bit about being able to register apiaries on a phone too, and having that GPS piece, so that if you're standing right next to the hive, that leaves less room for error or issues going up there. So that's one thing that really has come up quite a bit. And then again, having the information on what kind of a site it is and how to contact folks, that helps move things along as well. Another piece that may not seem as direct an advantage, but one of the things that FieldWatch does, it is a separate entity from the Department of Agriculture, but they have a series of different marketing efforts that are out there. So they are out expanding that. And why does that matter is, well, I can tell you that when we do get calls, when I think back to the range of calls we get throughout the entire season, I can tell you that some of the applicators that are involved in incidents are ones that are not from in-state. We get out-of-state applicators, and they come into the state each year, and we get calls about companies that may not be physically located in Iowa. And so having a broad network, having access to these maps really opens up your audience. So you're providing information to different groups, not just in-state applicators, but out-of-state applicators, and that comes up quite a bit with aerial season especially. And so when those planes are up, it's tough to know, if this is a company that has a membership, has that data, knows about this site, and how do they know about it, and then that's something that comes up as well. And so FieldWatch does do a fair amount of promotion with outside groups, not just applicators, but you can see mentioned there aerial applicators, other ag consultants and agronomists. So they really are trying to reach a broad network there. So getting the message out about it so that you have people coming into that system. So I know that they come up as well to some of these meetings, and I'm not going to spend much on their promotional piece there. But they are well recognized in a variety of states, and it just continues to roll off. How many folks have some of these signs from FieldWatch or DriftWatch or BeechAC? We used to have signs that were, spray signs that the Department of Agriculture made some time ago, but I believe they've halted that, and these are the signs that are now available.
How do you order?
I believe you order them off the website.
Okay.
And so they're similar, the black and yellow, but to provide on the ground notification, not just on the website, but so folks, maybe you've got people that are coming through on the right of way. Maybe the county or somebody's coming down spraying for one reason or another. But applicators that you may not even be thinking of that are working in the area. So having some of those signs up, I know some folks have had success with that, also. And those are available, so they do have those. I think that might be all from the FieldWatch component. Any questions about FieldWatch and how they work, how the website works, what you can expect?
So I know there's gonna be a lot of questions coming up here when the planes start flying. So most of the time I see this on our Facebook pages where someone's like, oh my gosh, someone's spraying, what do I do?
Yep.
What's the contact that we can say, hey, if you're concerned, please go to here? Because I'm gonna do that.
There, pollinator protection, very nice.
Yeah, well, so this'll get more into kind of the pesticide programs. Many times people have just questions about FieldWatch. What is it? How does it work? What can I expect? And again, the main thing is that we've just seen a big emphasis on the communication aspect, and that really does make a difference. So when we jump to the topic of incidents, and what do I do? You know, I mean, that's kind of later on. We hope that, you know, other tools, you know, prevail and we don't have these issues happen.
Okay,
But if we do get them, this is the next section.
so registering your bees, is there a certain day you have to have, did I hear, I don't know if it's true or not, but as long as you're registered for the first of the month, you're okay. If you register after the first of the month, they don't necessarily have to look at it.
So I believe the way it's written, and I'll have a slide here that should specifically address that, is which day of the month the commercial applicator has to go and check the registry. And that's where it is. So if you're on the registry, when they're required to check it, there.
Your day after that, they don't have to follow it then.
Well,
They should.
the issue is that the site isn't on the registry, so how would they know about
Yeah,
the sensitive location? It's not that there aren't any protections, it's just which protection applies, or which regulation, I should say, applies to that specific situation. We have to look at what information was available and when, and that's what we come out to do, and we try to do that as, again, neutral party. We're not representing one side or the other when we're coming out and doing these. We're looking at straightforward the facts that we find. So, was the information available to the applicator? And so we do go and look at that. And you can't go register the site after the incident and expect that they would have had that information earlier on. You would have to point to something else, and what someone from our office would say is, well, do you have something? Did you send a letter to them? You know, how was it communicated, or, you know, they would ask you to provide that clarification if you claim that individual knew of that particular site. So they would ask for that. So there are ways to do that. The registry is one way, one piece of information you look for. And what you're going to find is when I go through some of these slides about the pesticide incidents, they're more general. It's very difficult to get into specifics unless we're looking at a case and we're looking at all the details that go along with that particular investigation. We look at everything and we put it all together in one picture. So when we do get a call, we do have certain information that we have to have. We can't just get a phone call and say, come out to this address, and then magically a state inspector shows up and knows how to take care of everything that's going on. Because we do not have a master database in central Iowa that captures all of the pesticide activity in the state. We don't have anything like that. We don't have a monitoring tool. We don't have a required reporting system where we can go and search for that information. We do the investigation to recover a lot of that information. So the information you're going to want to have, and there's a phone number down there, and it'll be on the last slide there. The phone number is 515-281-8591, and that's a call center line. So there are several people that are staffed to be on that phone on weekdays, Monday through Friday, and they're there from 8 to 4:30. We are not an emergency response service. I'll go ahead and just say that. We are not an emergency response service. We are staffed during those times, those hours.
What would you say, like, if I give that number online, you are calling the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Steward? Like, what would you define?
You can just say the Pesticide Bureau. To report a pesticide accident or incident, call
Okay.
this phone number.
Okay.
And there are some handouts that I put back there, and it has our phone number, and it also talks about our investigations. It provides an overview of what to expect. It also has on there what information you're gonna need when you call, or when you wanna file a report. We do need to receive a report in order to begin the process. And that needs to be sent into the main office. You can't just call one of those regional guys who knows a guy, who knows a girl. You have to go in so that we can track the incident. We record it, and we actually report out counts. I mean, we're funded by EPA and by the state, so we have requirements too. We've got to keep up to date on those. And our investigations, again, we are a neutral party in these. We also collect information that many times goes into what you would term a public record, or it's public information. Unless it's labeled as confidential, it's not confidential. You know, a lot of the information is going to be public. So that's what you're doing once you start one of those. So the information you're going to need, we need to know the date the incident took place. We need to know the type of alleged pesticide exposure. So what are you calling us about? We need a brief description of that incident. Tell us what's going on. You know, what kind of a sprayer, was it a plane, was it a ground rig, you know, what are we calling in about? We'd like to also have information about the applicator. And if you don't know who sprayed the pesticide, we will also take down, do you know where the pesticide was sprayed? So many times folks can point to a field or a location where the pesticide was being sprayed, and that gives us a place to go to begin an investigation. If we don't have that type of information, a lot of times we end up with something like this. I mean, we're starting at the same point. I mean, we go out to a specific location. Let's say that we got a call about a yellow plane spraying a pesticide at this particular location, right at an intersection. I mean, to get an intersection is actually pretty good sometimes. Because someone will say, oh, I was about, 5 miles from, and it's very difficult for us to go out and determine which location it is. There's not a lot of landmarks that we can use. If you've got a landmark, that's great. We'll take, again, as much detail as you're able to provide. But many times we start out with something that is at this point. Where we don't have a set field, it becomes very challenging for us to do an investigation because we have to locate the applicator before we can really begin. And that can be tough. I can even say that, during aerial season, if you're standing on the road, when we say, well, which field were they spraying? And you're looking up, right? Your perception on which field they're spraying can be somewhat distorted based on where they really are and how close they are to you. So many times we get folks that may not have the exact location of the field. They may be 1 or 2 fields over. Yet the person on the ground swore they saw it was this field. But when we go back and do our investigation, what we're able to find is, well, this is the only one that was sprayed on this date and this time. And this is why date and time can be very helpful. And we ask for that information when people call. More
If you could
specifics.
take a picture of all planes, all helicopters are all got their own ID number on them.
If you've got a picture of the plane and we can make out the ID number, or if you took it down, maybe you wrote it down, absolutely. That even takes us a step further. We would gladly welcome that level of detail when someone's calling in. Because we can find that individual much quicker and locate the record, find out what they were spraying much quicker if we know their ID number, their N number.
So say like a co-op, do those sprayers have IDs on them? I know like a private farmer wouldn't, but like, what, commercial?
They're not gonna have an N number. N number is issued, that's going through, they have to register their aircraft through Iowa DOT. With certain ground rigs, you do, that's still DOT transportation requirements per se, but.
They might have a unit number or something maybe
Yeah.
on the applicator. That'd be about the most they'd have.
Okay.
So they can keep distinguish which one is which.
It comes back to, well, what type of vehicle are we discussing here, and what regulations apply to that particular vehicle type. And so with aircraft, they're going to be designated and numbered, is what you're going to find most commonly. But this can be challenging. This can be really challenging, and it's not to say that we expect everyone to have everything done. We're coming out to do an investigation, but again, the more details you have, the better odds the investigator has to begin collecting facts more quickly. They need a lead. They need a starting point. So many times with calls related to pollinators, those can get assigned in different ways. Sometimes we do a formal investigation where we come out to the site, do a site assessment, walk the property, look at the bees, look at particular areas that complainant, someone is calling in to report issues with. We'll look at those. And we'll begin to document information through photographs. We may collect samples. It just depends on the incident. After that, we will follow up with the applicator to determine what pesticides were applied, what were the dates and times, collect labels from that individual as well, statements, other things related to the application. We also look at weather information from the state climatologist's office, and we do have a regulatory lab bureau in the Department of Agriculture, so they run our samples for us. So samples go into that particular lab. So that would be involved in a formal misuse investigation. Some of the calls we get are more calls related to, well, what pesticide was being applied. And many times those can end up in an informational assistance where we're just trying to help parties communicate. In some cases, it's fertilizer. People will be putting fertilizer on. And in that case, there is no investigation. We don't have authority over fertilizer applications, so we wouldn't be the ones to even do that. But communicating what chemicals, what pesticides, that type of information. Other situations, if people are calling and let's say it's a fungicide that's going on a crop, if it's a fungicide that does not carry any statements about being hazardous to pollinators and there are no warnings on that label, we would not have any ability to kick in the bee rule. In order for the bee rule to take effect, you need a pesticide that's labeled as toxic to bees in order for that regulation to apply to that situation. So there are a number of fungicides that don't carry those. I'm not going to say all, but again, this is why we go to the label, the specific product that people use, because that's where we'll have to go eventually. Herbicides, if you look at some of those herbicide labels, not all of those are going to carry statements related to pollinators. Some may, some may not. It's all dependent on what's found during that registration process and what gets put on that label when it goes through the risk assessments. In addition to that, we do have a state apiarist, and I know some folks do call in and are looking for an apiary inspection, so that's another place where these end up. If we do have a call related to planting, let's say someone alleges that their hives weren't doing well right after planting of treated seed, we do have a different type of follow-up that we do in those instances because there has been some talk about impacts related to treated dust as a treated dust abrasion that might move at the act of planting. So we do have a follow-up for that as well. So it just depends on the situation that's called in and what we're doing. So we take down a lot of information. The folks on the phone will be asking for information from you about really what sort of an incident is it. This is an example of one of our intake forms. We're looking at whether or not there was a drift incident. Is this a situation where bees were out foraging and that's how they were believed to come in contact with the pesticide or an issue? People also call in related to the planting activities again, so dust abrasion. And what sort of symptoms are you seeing in your bees? Sometimes that can help us determine what type of a chemical or chemistry is impacting them. So that can be helpful as well. And then also, where did the colony overwinter? What were they healthy? What kind of status were they in before the incident? And how are they doing now. All this information is helpful to provide to the investigators, so when they come out, they're at a good starting point. You know, they have good information, they don't have to repeat that, they may even be more prepared to begin the investigation. So there may be a variety of follow-up type situations. As far as the Iowa Bee Rule, this is what we have on in our regulation, so this is in our administrative rules. So we talked a little bit about being on the apiary, and it does say that registration expires each year. So do folks know that if you register on FieldWatch, you will need to renew your registration each year? It doesn't just roll over. That does need to take place. In addition to that, we had talked a little bit about the pesticide having to carry a statement as far as being toxic to bees or toxic to pollinators in order for this particular regulation to apply to that situation. So that's something that comes up. It applies between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. and it applies to a 1 mile radius around a registered apiary. It is really where this particular regulation comes into play. Have folks called in or had questions about the Iowa Bee Rule in the past, or is this new? Or are folks familiar with the Bee Rule? Okay. Okay. In addition to that, I know that our apiary program and Iowa State University have put together some best management practices, and so there is a pollinator working group out at Iowa State, and we do participate with that group and provide updates on things that we're seeing from incidents that are being called in, but they're always looking at improving best management practices, and communication continues to be a big piece of that as well. But there are groups. Has anyone called into Iowa State Extension or had assistance from the county office at all? Pollinators? Oh, okay. Well, I do know that there are a number of folks that were pretty active in that starting out. And we continue to, I think they're going to have a Pollinator Fest, if I'm not mistaken, at Ryman Gardens. They try to do a little bit of outreach as well through Central Iowa, providing more information. So
You know what that is?
it's coming up. It might be in the next couple of weeks, I want to say. Usually it's just after the last of June, so usually beginning of July or the very, very end of June. And I know we usually have one of our staff members going out there and participating.
I seen something, I don't know what it was, but Iowa State, for the bee club, they were asking for beekeepers with knowledge to come and participate or something like that, but I don't remember the date.
It's on June 25th,
That sounds about right.
10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
So just another group that does try to, just like yourselves, try to stay active and provide more outreach so that people are more familiar with certain pesticides and what sort of situations apply when you're using those. And again, it comes down to not just how to use the pesticides, but when you're selecting what pesticide to use for your specific situation. And that goes for homeowners as well as anyone who's applying to public lands or even your own private lands if you're going to be spraying in other locations. Some other numbers that are helpful, because we do get calls in related to just general flight practices when folks see, especially during aerial application season, so late July, some of it starts. August is usually pretty busy with calls about planes flying.
They're crazy people.
Our office does not have any regulatory authority over flight practices. That actually would go into the FAA office, and so that's their phone number. They're located centrally in Iowa too, so they would be the ones that, we'll give you their phone number over the phone if we get calls, and we do get calls every year about just how planes are flying. But we don't have any ability to do that, so we'll probably say something along the lines of, well, are they spraying a pesticide? Because that's where we come in. In addition to that, if you've got questions about specific chemicals, so if you are talking to your neighbor about a pesticide that's being put down, maybe it's a herbicide, pre-emergent, and you wanna know, well, is that something I should be worried about with my bees and being in close proximity? This National Pesticide Information Center was created for some of those purposes, to address questions like that. They do have quite a bit of fact sheets on different chemicals and commonly used pesticides that should provide some of that information as well. So they're more of an informational resource. And they do have a phone number, but I believe they're only open for 4 hours during the work week, so there's a set time when you can call them. In addition to that, we do get calls related to chemical spills. So if you are aware of maybe a leak or something else that goes on, we get calls about that when someone's got a sprayer leak on a roadway, or maybe someone came across something on a road and it looks like someone just dumped or left some chemical there. People will call that into our office, but really that needs to go to the DNR office if there's a spill. And that is an emergency response number, so they would be more appropriate to handle follow-up for those as well. So sometimes we get those calls too. But other than that, this is our main Bureau contact page. All the contact information and what our investigation procedures are, that's going to be in those handouts, so you should have some of that. I was trying to think about, someone had asked me what types of calls we're getting right now, because sometimes people are interested in, well, what's being sprayed right now? A lot of times it depends on which part of the state you're in. We also find that some spots are more prone to certain insect-related issues or pest outbreaks, and that is the case. Most oftentimes, and we've seen in past years, we've seen Japanese beetles up in the northeastern side of the state. We start seeing, which co-ops and which applicators are starting to talk about some of those applications and timings and whatnot, but that wouldn't happen yet. That's going to be a little bit later. Those beetles don't come out until later on anyway. But right now, it's mostly pre-emergent herbicides that are going on, I would say, for most of the different areas in the state. I think we got our first call about pollinator question. It was probably, might have been this week. So usually we don't get calls this early related to beehives and pollinators, unless there's a planting dust issue, someone noticed something at planting. And we haven't received any of those this year, so.
I have a neighbor that's going organic. Would he be spraying for insecticides?
So
Do they do, because last year was his first year, and there were lots of bugs just flying around, not my bees necessarily, and I didn't see him spray for anything. I figured it was a good thing that my bees would be safe, but maybe
Well,
it's.
it depends on what organic program they're executing. There is a national organic standards program, so if someone is going to be certified in accordance with those
Yeah, I guess
standards,
it's gotta be 3 years, you can't use chemicals.
and if they're going to be certified too, and that's the other thing, some people will begin organic production in the spirit of being organic, or some of those production standards. But if you're going to go through the whole process and become certified organic, usually there's someone who comes out and certifies you, and there's more detailed information on what it is that your program is doing. And again, that goes with the certification too. And there are different certifying groups that you can pursue even with that. USDA has a national organic program that you can go through, so
Just
that's.
Put a sign up, so I should go look at the sign and see what it says, and
Well,
then
you can ask.
find out.
And that's where, most of the time, we're not gonna have the answers, and that's kind of where, we come from is, again, we're coming in right at the start for most of these, and so we end up asking just as many questions and following it up. So if it's something that you're comfortable with doing, there's no reason why you can't ask. But sometimes that doesn't work, and there are still questions out there and concerns, and that's where, you can call our phone number, and we have folks out in the state that go out and do some of those follow-ups. But organic, it can mean different things. As I mentioned, you know, it depends on what type of a program it is. And just to say organic doesn't mean non-insecticide. There would be many times with those production systems, there's going to be some type of management strategy that's implemented. You're still producing a crop in
Last
some
year he was
capacity.
burning the weeds, it was so dry, and here he's out there lighting fires in the field, which is, it worked apparently, and the field didn't start on fire, but it's like you're looking out the window and you're seeing this flames.
Well, there can be mechanical, cultural,
Yeah, I mean,
biological,
it's interesting. Certainly
chemical
nothing I knew.
interventions. So what I'm trying to say is that we don't have a definitive
Yeah, I
answer
don't-
to that. But organic doesn't mean non-insecticidal. There can still be
Okay,
products, and there's many pesticides that we see with labels that even advertise for use in organic production. So some of those are out there. But most of the calls that we're getting early on in this year are going to be more drift-related claims and ones that pertain to wind speed, applications in high winds, and concerns related to that. So we usually get a lot of calls about pollinators a little bit more when some of these insect issues start popping up, or when some of the planes are out. But you tell me, I mean, what are some of the concerns that you've had with your bees past couple of years?
I've gotten emails and stuff when they've been, you know, right next to my beehives and, hey, we're gonna be out there spraying, and I've happened to be over there looking at it's after 6 o'clock, and, you know, and they're following the rules, so it ain't like you can do much about it. You just hope that your bees you're in and the wind's right, and, you know, so, and there's not much you can do if they're doing what they're saying they can do, or say what they're, you know, by following the rules, there's not much you can do about it at that point. And is there something you can do, you know?
It would depend upon the product, and did the chemical move off-site? Are we talking about a situation where?
Was the wind too strong that they shouldn't have been out there in the first place, maybe?
Is there drift taking place? I mean, is the chemical coming on? And then many times there's usually other questions that come up, not just the pollinators, but, you know, did the chemical move on to someone's garden? We get a lot of calls about that. Or places where, you know, people or pets or children might be. I mean, we get calls related to that during different times of the year. Livestock, whenever it goes off-site, if there's, you know, even where livestock may graze, you know, if there's a concern related to what the chemical was, and it goes back to, we've got to go back to the applicator and find out what they sprayed. And for some of those products, some of those can be very broad labels. They can be labeled for multiple uses, so that means that someone did do a lot of work to determine, well, can this be applied? What amount, what residue is acceptable for different types of food and feed? Some of those things can be determined. Sometimes we don't have it. Sometimes it's not approved. You've got to go back to the products to find out. So we get a variety of calls, but depending on the time of year, you know, the scenario again, if the bees aren't out, they're not active at that time, was there even an exposure? You know, and we can't. We do get calls about concerns of not letting situations happen, meaning that we almost get calls or requests to counsel, you know, on the front end before you know, pesticide applications take place. We do that more through training. It's not as if we do one-on-one consultations. We don't have the manpower to go out and do that for the entire state, but again, that's where we work with Iowa State University. They put together training content, and what we find in our incidents and investigations is what helps feed into parts of that. So we do try to communicate what those issues are, but basically the bee rule component would not apply if they're spraying within the time frame that, is after 6 p.m. You would have to, we would have to hear something of another alleged violation that was taking place. So what is the concern? Again, that's where we're talking about some of these other scenarios. Was there an overspray? Was there a drift? Drift onto what? That's what we're looking for. But most of the time with pollinators, I think a lot of the calls are concerns about chemicals that might have a particular potency or toxicity. Many times if it's going to be something with an acute toxicity, you're going to see those effects pretty quick. Especially if there's an insecticide included in there. Many times the insecticides, they carry statements. Those are going to be more common, because otherwise you have to look for a chemical that had selectivity, meaning it would be potent against, an aphid, but not a honeybee. But it's not as common to get that. So. But it can happen. So, are there other incidents or types of scenarios that come up, or questions you might have or about?
Doesn't everybody have their hives registered? You haven't registered your hive yet? You want to learn how to do it?
Sure.
Get your phone, got a phone, we can get you probably registered.
It's free.
Yeah.
It's free.
Well, don't necessarily have to have your phone, as long as we have an area, we can, we can help you get through it.
So, other than that, I'm trying to think what other questions we get. I think we've covered most of those. So that's the ones that come in.
That's very interesting.
And hopefully it reiterates that there is a program down in the Department of Ag that does send people out, and we do respond to those incidents. And we try to get out fairly quickly. So once we're notified of an incident, you can see in the handout, we usually try to get out pretty quickly. The only challenge is going to be, well, how many other calls did we get that same day for that particular inspector or investigator? So.
Do you send, I wish I knew about the number sooner. I mean, I kind of knew, but I didn't know. Have you guys ever sent out a mailer before the beginning of the season, to say apiaries or specialty crop people saying, hey, if you do see an incident, give us a call,
So we usually do that by partnering with other groups that have a direct connection with different folks across the state. So I know just recently, I think Iowa State University put out something in their, I think it was in a blog, it might have been their crops management newsletter, talking about reporting dicamba cases to IDOLs. So there are different groups that continue to put our reporting information out there. Our website has a brochure, has the whole process on there. I know Practical Farmers of Iowa have also put together information that involves kind of our program and where to call, where to respond. So there have been different efforts to make our program more visible. And we do it whenever we go out to meetings and we have staff out there, and then also we're going out to incidents, so there is one-on-one connections with different groups. So we try, so feel free to share.
Perfect. That's what I needed to know.
Wherever you'd like.
I'm going to spam this on Facebook. I don't know how many times I read it last year where someone just wasn't informed.
Yeah.
And that's why I told her, we need someone here to talk about this, so we can get this information out.
It's gonna be on our Facebook page for our Beekeepers Club, so everything we recorded here is gonna be out there. Even though just a few of us here, a lot more people are gonna see this through our club.
Sure.
So hopefully it gets out the word a little more, and like I said, if I would think if you see something happen and you go watch your bees, document what you found, what you see that day, and watch your bees for the next day or two. I mean, you don't have to call in because, hey, somebody was spraying, well, did it hurt my bees? You know, if it didn't hurt my bees, I guess there's no reason to get worried about it, you know, type of deal.
So there can be, it's a pretty big state. There's a lot of pesticide applications that can take place in the course of a growing season, based on the acres that we have. Not all of them get called in. So that's another thing to consider is out of the entire state. There are some that take place as they should be, following the label directions. So if that's going on, was there an exposure? I mean, that's what we're out there doing an investigation to look at. And so we don't know the answer when we begin. That's why we do the investigation. So if you'd like to begin that process, that's when you want to call in. And I would say, don't wait a couple months. We get people that call in, in the fall, maybe calling in about something that happened last year. We get folks that call in about something that happened, in the spring, but they're calling us in August. Call us, closer to the actual date of the incident if you can. Now, I would agree with what you're saying is it might be good to watch for a day or two. I'm not saying call.
I mean, if your bees, if all of a sudden you got a whole pile of dead bees out in front of your hive in 2 or 3 days later,
Right.
as long as you documented that day before, they were spraying this field and the plane was this number, and I documented that, and I watched my bees for the next 3 days. Well, were they spraying between 8 o'clock and 6 o'clock? If they were spraying in that time period, well, then there's an issue. If they were spraying after that, well, there's really nothing I can do because they were following the rules. Even though my bees died, they were really following the rules, but, that there could be something there because maybe they should have been spraying a certain thing.
If you have an effect that's very, very apparent,